All right, welcome everyone to Chicano Lit 21. That rhymes, and that's fitting because it's poetry. And so with us today, we have Kenneth Robert Chacon, and I'm going to start with your bio. I'm sorry, these are Marisol Baca's poems. I had your bio here somewhere, like your official bio. And you know what? I think I may have closed that window. So I'm going to go ahead and just Google that real quick and go off your page. There we go. Okay, can we see that, Kenny?
Yeah, all right. That's what I pay $100 and something for a year. Yeah, I haven't updated it in a while, but yeah, that's me.
You know, this is a fantastic website, and I linked this in the extra credit assignment for students to check out. And I'm actually impressed. I think this is the first time I've ever, I hate to say it, checked out your website, but it's really impressive with audio poems and articles and whatnot. And here's your bio. So I'm going to go ahead and read this because it's just great to read bios out loud. I think it's a poetry tradition. So Kenneth Chacon is the author of The Cholo Who Said Nothing and Other Poems, Turning Point 2017. His work has appeared or is forthcoming in the Colorado Review, Cimarron Review, Palette Poetry, Blackbird, and Huizache, hopefully I'm saying that right, among others. Chacon is a native of Fresno, California, and teaches English at Fresno City College. He has presented his work to audiences as wide-ranging as the Congreso Internacional de Literatura. Then here's my struggling with Spanish. Literatura Chicana in Salamanca, Spain. Wow. To graduates in London, England. Oh, to graduates in Pleasant Valley Prison in Coalinga, California. His work targets the homies, the poor and the lost, and those who advocate for freedom and justice on their behalf. Chacon's dream is to take risks with his poetry, to say something that will impact the streets and make a difference to people living impossible realities. And welcome, Kenneth Chacon, to the class.
This is like a CLS 21 podcast. That's pretty cool. Thanks for having me on your show, bro. No,
thank you very much, man, for partaking. And we have Maria Vargas with us, one of my students, and she's got, she turned on her camera, so that's great.
Hi, Maria.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks.
Hello, Maria. How's it going?
Pretty good, Mr. Medrano. Just trying to join here.
Oh, great.
But I had time.
All right. So, Kenneth, basically the assignment that I gave my students is simply those who partake in the question and answer session, as long as there are questions that are relevant questions to your work and to your life, etc., that they get full credit for extra credit. And
all right, Maria, great.
I think I'm the only one.
What's that?
I think I'm the only one here.
That's all right. That means you're rising to the top.
Who watch on the recording, they're obligated to write their thoughts.
Understood.
There we go. That's what we're doing. Okay. So I want to welcome you. And one of the things I noticed in your bio, and I think those who are new to poetry, especially like if you're new to college and you're taking literature classes for the first time, and you're going to see like published so place. And I think students get books. I think students get, oh yeah, his book was published, right? By a university press or by an independent press or whatever, right? But then you see like these literary journals, and I'm not entirely confident that that students know exactly what a literary journal is and why they're important. So maybe you can talk about some of the journals, why it's important that writers publish to journals, and what does Cimarron Journal Review mean, and all those things.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think I can give you the official narrative, you know what I mean? Just kind of like the what you should know if you want to become a writer, and then I can give you my opinion.
Okay.
So you know, what people should know is that, you know, you kind of build your legitimacy, you know, your street cred, or not street, but you know, your university cred, your academic cred, your, you know, your MFA program, which is the creative writing program that most, you know, would-be writers will take in college. Like I got my MFA in poetry from Fresno State. I think you got your MFA from Minnesota, right? University of
Correct.
Minnesota. And
Yeah.
so, you know, we basically went through the academy to become a poet. So there's like an official, you know, that's like the legal way of becoming a poet, you know what I mean? But there are some undocumented poets who, you know, are, you know, start off with as rappers and things like that. And I think that because I come from an academic background, you know, it's important for me to publish in journals that have been around for like 20, 30 years, or that are the newest big thing, because it gets your name out there. And then a lot of those places will have social media profiles. So it's just like, you know, somebody shares your poem, somebody shares that. And it's like just a way to kind of establish yourself as a voice in the poetry community, to get your name out there. So that way opportunities for books, somebody sees your name and says, hey, you know, I might buy their book, or you know, maybe I'll see if they have a manuscript or something like that, you know what I mean? And so it's
Yeah.
just a lot of opportunities. Now, in terms of me, Kenneth
Yes.
Chacon,
Yes.
you know, I'm 45 years old, so you know, I think I'm done with trying to impress people. What journals mean to me is that I haven't given up my dream of doing big things with writing. And you know, it's like you know, I would like to have like an impact on the streets, like it says, but with the age of COVID, it's like you don't even get a chance to read your poetry in front of people anymore. So you can't even, you know, it's very uncommon. And this is actually my first
Yeah.
poetry thing in a long time. Um, but it just kind of keeps me in the game and keeps me wanting to write, and just it's like a pat on the back for me. Like, hey, you know, Kenny, you're doing all right. Keep writing. Don't give up your dream. You know, do a great job teaching at Fresno City in the meantime. But you know, don't give up your dreams.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you brought up a really interesting point about COVID, and how that's really just like changed everything. And so if we're on campus, there's, especially in April, there's always poetry events happening, and that's when we started this poetry unit. Um, you know, kind of tying with National Poetry Month, and there's always a poet. There's always a Latino poet reading at City, and it's, or in the community, and it's just a great opportunity. If we were having like an actual class, I would say, well, you know, let's go and attend this reading together as a class, because it's cool. It's cool just to be in that zone. In the virtual universe, it's not the same thing, right? It's just not.
It's just not. Yeah, I don't think anything is. You know what I mean? You can
Nothing.
have,
Yeah,
you know, I mean,
exactly.
there's plenty of got, you know, forgive me, online pornography, but it ain't the same thing. You know what I mean? It's just not. You know what I mean? And I think that that's the same with poetry reading. That's the same with watching, you know, YouTube videos of other people eating. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's great, but it ain't the same thing as eating it yourself.
Yeah.
And
There's a
you know,
jet
one of the
flying
things,
over, so hopefully it doesn't cut out my mic or anything.
I think that was over at my house.
The
Um,
same jet.
yeah. So yeah, nothing's the same
Yeah.
online. You know what I mean? I
So
mean, you know, it's better
nothing's
than
the same.
nothing. It's better than
Yeah.
nothing, but it's not the same.
Being a student online, you know, Maria, have just a personal question, Maria, just not too personal, but um, have you taken other Chicano studies classes like on campus?
This is actually the first Chicano class I've ever taken,
Yeah.
ever. I was a nursing student, and I'm trying to transfer to Fresno State for my degree in biology.
Okay.
So
That's
I
great.
needed like I don't, an elective, I suppose. And I chose this one because my husband's Chicano and
Mhm.
I was born in Mexico. So it's really hard for me to understand how he relates to being Mexican because it's
Mhm.
very different to me. But this class has helped me understand where he's coming from because before, like, I just figured he was white because he was born here. So like this class really has opened up my eyes. Like it's a
Fantastic.
whole different culture in a sense.
And yeah, fantastic. That's great. And I mean, I think your perspective, your point of view will gel perfectly in this interview because uh, Kenny and I'm assuming Kenny was born here, but I was born here. You're native of Fresno, Kenny, and it says in your bio. But
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it'll be interesting to get your perspective, Maria.
well, I just have a question for Kenneth from Chacon. Like, you're from Fresno, and I pretty much grew up in Fresno. I got here when I was 7 years old. What part of Fresno did you grow up in?
So I basically there's like two stories of my life. There's the story of like when I was just a youngster. I lived on Blackstone and Bullard. And my
Oh,
family, both sides of my family were from Pinedale. So, basically from that neighborhood to Pinedale, like I was always back and forth. But then when my mom died and I went to go live with my brother. And so I grew up in Shaw and Marks. Like, I don't know, where those duplexes are, Park West
yeah.
Apartments. Like, I think they call it Little Watts. It's pretty violent right now. But I grew up in that neighborhood. And when I grew up there, it wasn't that bad. I was like I was like a little cholo or whatever. But that's where I grew up. And then I moved all over. I moved also to Olive and Peach and Olive for a while. And, I was just all over as a teenager.
Oh, okay, yeah,
How
because I
about you?
remember back in the 90s, there was like a lot of gangs, and I think I don't know who it was, but they started cracking down late 90s, early 2000s.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I grew up on like close to Belmont and San Pablo, so I would see a lot of that.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, I was like, oh, maybe he's from that area.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
the three strikes era.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's when the cracking down really started happening.
yeah. Well, when I was young, I used to like kind of like think it was something to brag about because like Fresno had 93 murders in one year, and we had like the highest murder rate in California next to Oakland. And so I was like, yeah, I come from the hood, you know what I mean? Like I was like kind of proud of it.
Yeah.
And we never came close to that number again, but I think this year we're gonna probably reach it, like because there's so many more shootings. Like when I was growing up, it was the era of like random shootings. Like somebody would just shoot you for the colors that you were wearing, and if you're at a bus stop, you're always like, you know what I mean? Like it was just a whole different generation, and it got gangs grew, but it got less violent. And then now, all of a sudden, there's this explosion of violence this last year and a half. And it reminds me of the days growing up, like at least from what I hear or what I read.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I do want to say is I commend you on your education and how far you've come, especially reading your bio. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Did you always know you were going to go to college, or is that just something that happened as life kept going?
In many ways,
Question.
go ahead, Mike.
Question. That's a great question.
Yeah, in many ways, I think we often hear the word privilege, who's privileged and who's not privileged. And I don't know I'm not going to tell you what to think about that term or how to use it or anything like that. But I understand that in many ways, I was more privileged than others because, my mom and dad, they were divorced. But my dad always had a job. He was an alcoholic. He was a womanizer, a little bit abusive to my mom. And finally, my mom just divorced his ass. And grew up as a complete mama's boy. But my mom, like, I was an accident. So I came years after my brothers and sisters, like 13 years after. So she spoiled the shit out of me. You know what I mean? And she always even though we were poor, I had no idea we were poor. You know what I mean? I never knew we were poor until I started seeing like white friends who had nice houses. I was like, oh shit, we're poor. But I never knew we were poor. And I grew up with the idea that I could become the president of the United States. And
That's
when
because your mom always like put that in your head.
exactly, because she just made me believe that I was so smart and I could do anything. I had no idea I was limited. I honestly, when they would ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would always say, I want to be the president of the United States.
Mm.
And I meant it, you know what I mean? And I truly believed it could happen. And, and I remember in 6th grade, I got like a presidential award for having like a, you know, a high GPA. And I remember it was signed by Ronald Reagan. I thought it was signed by Ronald Reagan. You know what I mean? I was like, wow, the president signed this. You know, I didn't know anything about politics or who Reagan was. I just was like, that's the president, you know. Anyway.
I got that same letter too.
What?
Yes, yes. And then I transferred. I went from Lane Elementary in Southeast Fresno to Hawthorne Elementary in North Fresno. And so I was bragging to all the students there, but for some reason, during that year, in that first year of transfer, I struggled. So I ended up as a C student. So all my friends said I was BSing because they're like, you're not an A student recognized by Reagan. Stop lying. You're a C student. And I was a C
You know
student.
what? I'm sorry, Michael. I'm gonna have to check your papers. Let me see.
So let's kind of like change gears a little bit and talk about the poetry. So the Cholo Who Said Nothing is your first book, is that correct? And
It's the first book that got published. Yeah, I wrote a novel before that, but never had too much success with it. But yeah, it's my first and only book, and that was published in 2017.
Yeah. And so let me just share my screen and go to those poems real quick. Okay, so this week we read Christ in a Cholo Stance, and we also read Letter to a Neighbor After we moved to the good part of town. So so are those two poems in the Cholo Who Said Nothing?
No, so yeah, so it was published in 2017, and it was that that was a lot of writing I did in college.
Uh-huh.
And I had let it sit for like 10 years, and you know, I had all kinds of other concerns, a lot of demons I was battling with, but I finally went back to some of the writing I had done previously, and I go, okay, I'm gonna give it one more try. I'm gonna try to get published. And then I spent like I don't know, a few months just really diving in. So that was all my old stuff and a few new things at towards the end. But basically that's been 4 years. So in the meantime, I think I got one more Cholo book in me. And and I say that like honestly, because when I was in a gang, it impacted me. It was a very short time. Like I was only really, really like a big gangster for about 1.5 years. But I really, really wanted to be the best gangster on earth. Like I was like totally brainwashed, if that makes sense. And it impacted me to where like even years later when I wasn't, hanging out with the homeboys, it would still impact the way I would stare at people or the way I would interact in the world. Like having been a really, really, really serious gang member for only like 1.5 years changed the rest of my life. Like, I don't know how else to put it. And it's like, one of the things, Maria, and maybe anybody else is watching this, one of the things that I love about poetry is that poetry to me, it's not about getting famous. It used to, I wanted to be famous, but more than that now, I think it's about self-care. And I think that I get through a lot of my own shit, my own personal baggage, my own personal demons, my own, things that are going on in my head. And it's kind of like therapy for me to, like a journal. And so all of these are kind of like me, because whereas the first book, it was a lot of just personal poems. Like, this is me, my poetry. Whereas in the new book, which these two are a part of, it's more like I'm telling the story of a character that I have distance from, if that makes sense. And I think, I keep writing all these Cholo poems, but it's because I want to get it out of my system. And so I can move on and kind of say, okay, And not that I
Is
ever
that-
want to forget those people that I met, because that's why I write, is because I want to bring stories to light. But, you know, it's like me getting rid of personal demons.
Does that help you?
For sure. Oh my gosh. You know, and, you know, I think it's just human nature for us to, you know, to feel sorry for ourselves, to feel bad about ourselves, and to think, oh, poor is me, I didn't have this, or somebody did this to me. And they're good reasons to hurt, they're good reasons to feel pain. And if it were up to me, I would just drink and smoke and you know, party my cares away. But they don't ever go anywhere. And you know, you wake up, you know, you're all cruda, but you wake up the next day and you're like, I gotta face my demons. And
Yeah,
the
because
way
they're
that
not gonna go away. That's a
exactly,
good form of therapy. I've never
it is.
heard of anyone talking about writing poetry in this way, kind of like self-therapy, but it's great poems though, especially the one Letters to the Neighbor. That was one of my favorite poems from the ones that we read about you.
Yeah, that one,
There- There's
that one's
actually,
funny.
oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
Kenny.
I like the ending.
There's actually a number of actually it's been going on for a while, but poetry in the prisons and poetry teachers in the prisons, and so that, you know, that's been going on for a long while. And I know, Kenny, you were at you taught poetry at Pleasant Valley Prison. Is that correct?
Yeah, I never actually taught it. Um, I got sick. Unfortunately, I had some health issues when I was supposed to start, but I did all the trainings, and I did a graduation keynote speech. So they were having a graduation on A yard. Hey, I walked A yard, eh?
Oh
Sorry.
my goodness. Oh, wow.
I would never make it in prison, so I like to pretend that I'm big and tough in prison. Anyways, so so anyways, I was chilling with my homies on A yard, and basically I was, you know, it was me and my son. I took he's 18 now, but he was probably about 16 when I took him, and I wanted him to get, you know, like searched and checked into the prison and shit like that, because I want him to like realize, you know, ain't no future in it. You know, don't make, you know, because so many people make cholos and gangsterism look sexy, or like it's cool, or like it's fun, or some, and they're selling you something, because, you know, a lot of that life just ended up in prison, in pain, in broken families, in addiction that you can't control, in rotten teeth, and, you know, those kinds of things, like something that's totally not sexy.
Yeah.
But anyways, I got an opportunity to go, and they asked me to do the keynote speech for this graduation. So some of these people were getting their high school diplomas. Some of these people were getting their AS or AA degrees from community college. Some people were just, you know, had a certificate program, like, you know, for one of the jobs in the prison, but they were allowed to have their families. And so their families, for like the first time
Wow.
in years, not just their, you know, their conjugal visit lovers, but their families were allowed to be there. And man, you just could not believe these tattooed, you know, badass looking vatos who had to drop out. They had to drop out of their gangs in order to be about this, you know, be in this program. But they were
That
just
comes with a lot of
proud.
risk.
And
A lot of risk there.
and I had guys who I wrote a poem and I dedicated it to them, and they were like sending me their poetry for like months afterwards, you know what I mean? And honestly, like one of the things, since this is a Chicano Latino class, like one of the things they don't tell us about our history is that, you know, poetry was widely accepted or widely like cherished among the Nahuas or the Mexica or the Aztecas or whatever you want to call, you know, the original people. Um, and, you know, to be a warrior poet was to be something big, you know what I mean? And I think that I like the idea of a warrior poet, you know what I mean? And not because I like war, I hate war, but I think it's like this kind of cool contradiction, you know. I don't know. Anyways, I'm
Yeah,
rambling
well,
now, but
yeah, the poet used to be very, I mean, this is just like around the world. The poet was very integral um, to like certain like monarchies. I was trying to find the word, like certain monarchies, you know. So I took a class on one time. I took a class on Middle Eastern poetry, and Rumi, who is like a Rumi is a Iranian poet that is very influential to many Chicano poets. I know Tim Hernandez, who reread one of his poems earlier in the semester. He's a huge fan of Rumi, and he even named his daughter Rumi. But Rumi was a poet laureate of the monarchy, so he was appointed as a court poet, and he was kind of like treated like royalty in a way. But he wrote all these poems about mysticism, about the natural world, and things like that. But let's see. Let's go ahead and maybe share. Maybe you can read one of your poems. I mean, I'll leave it up to you if you want to read one of the poems that we read this week. And
you know what? I'm hoping to share a poem for the first time ever. So basically, I got a poem that I've been working on a lot the last couple months, and I kind of want to I want to introduce it to the world.
Okay.
So Maria, Michael, you're the first victims of my poem, okay?
That's pretty cool.
Awesome. And the world.
And I basically just want to see what it sounds like, and I want to read it for an audience. So
Fantastic.
And
this is also going out to the world because this will eventually be on my YouTube page. So
you must pay me for that. Okay, can you do me a favor and let me share my screen?
Oh yes. Let's see.
You got some pretty tight security on this. I had to register my thumbprint earlier just to be allowed into the class.
I'm gonna pause the recording because I've never done this before. So God will be with me. So
Cholo book in me. Okay, as I was saying earlier, folks, I published a book called The Cholo Who Said Nothing. And now I'm working on a second book called How the Cholo Became a Mystic. And I think this is, I think that's my last Cholo book, although I reserve the right to write another one. But basically what I'm trying to do with this new book is, I'm obsessed with the idea of being a mystic. The idea that, someone can be so closely connected to God. And, and I don't even want to define God in any specific sense, because then people will start thinking, well, that's Christian, that's colonization, or that's disingenuous. You don't even know anything about the original faith of the people that, the Mexica. Well, I'll let you decide what God means to you. But I'm obsessed with the idea of being so in control of your anxiety, so in control of your emotions, your depression, your battles, your weaknesses, your strengths even, that you walk hand in hand with God each day. You feel like the Holy Spirit, or whatever you want to call it, is upon you. And I say that because I grew up with such anxiety, I grew up in a, I abused a lot of meth. I abused a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, and I always walked around with a lot of shame and guilt and anxiety. So the idea of a mystic always kind of stood out. And especially as we read, the poetry of Rumi, which is what you were talking about earlier.
right.
And Rumi's poetry, and he was a Sufi Muslim, you know what I mean? But I tell you, his words transcend religion, and it just makes you feel human. It makes you feel whole and complete. And anyways, so I'm sharing some new poetry with you, and I'm going to talk about the last line and read the poem that I connected to. So this is called A Portrait of the Cholo as a Young Man. This is a portrait of the Cholo as a young man, lying on a bed, hand under head, bare feet crossed at the ankles. He's looking at a black and white picture she took with her cousin at the fair last year. He's listening to War's greatest hits and training his hair with a red paisley bandana. His friend got a tattoo, a snarling bulldog like an invitation to a terrible bite that won't ever heal. He'd get one too, black and gray ink engraving the virgin flesh of his chest, but he's not sure what he'd get. He'd get her name if she asked him. Tonight, he'll dream he's standing in front of his dead mother's dresser mirror, trying on faces before the first day of school. She'll be there in the morning, bus number 20, magnificent in a sundress. Una morenita, a flower petaled in red and orange and brown, her smile as bright as a polar ice cap. He needs the right look to approach her. He's been a skater, he's been a jock, and now he's a cholo. Soon he'll be tweaker, then holy roller. And maybe someday, if God is as good as they say, he'll be a mystic, living with the wife of his youth far from the city, growing cannabis on ancestral land and eating wild honey and locusts, and writing songs about victory over death to the rhythm of his own breath, twirling like a dervish under the revelation of moonlight. But for now, through this wormhole, behold, he's just a wannabe cholo who dreams in red and orange and brown, and so much depends upon that black and white picture.
Oh. Yeah, so that's cool. You mentioned William Carlos Williams, I think in a text message. And so I was
Here, Mike, why don't you read the William Carlos Williams poem?
fantastic. Okay, so this is called The Red Wheelbarrow, and this poem actually inspired, I think it inspired Kenny's poem. And so William Carlos Williams, briefly, he was a part Puerto Rican, I believe part, I want to say part Jewish, but I could be mistaken. But he's from New Jersey, and he was a big influencer of Allen Ginsberg and a bunch of other poets. Yeah, yeah. So he was, yeah, he was in a way he is a Latino poet. And so this is one of my favorite poems, by the way, The Red Wheelbarrow. And so I'm going to read it. And then I want Kenny, I want you
Unless Maria wants to read it.
to
Maria?
mention I know I'm going off. Okay, here it goes. This is my first time I've read poetry to an audience, by the way, in a millennium. Okay. Red Wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens.
And after that, you have to snap. You have to go, oh,
Yes.
yeah. Ooh.
And it's a very short poem. And there's something about the structure, Kenny. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I mean, that poem right there, The Red Wheelbarrow, basically, I just, you know, one of the things that I think as a writer, like, we steal, you know, writers, like, what do they say? You know, good writers borrow, great writers steal, something like that.
Yes.
And I don't mean like we're being plagiarists in our essay and we're trying to pass off somebody else's work as our own. But what I am saying is that you know, this poem, The Red Wheelbarrow, has been like part of a discussion. Like, does this even mean anything? Is this just a bunch of like, you know, poetic mumbo jumbo, or does something actually depend on this red wheelbarrow?
Right. That's the key question.
And Maria, do you have any like, you know, impressions of like this poem? It's, you know, there's no right answer. I really believe that in context of this.
I mean, I wonder what it is that depends on the wheelbarrow. Like,
so much.
yeah.
Yeah.
How much is so much?
So much.
Okay, check this out right here. Look at the lines. Look at these are little couplets. So these are two lines that are couplets, right? Look at this. Boom. It's kind of long here, like 3 syllables, 1 syllable. 3 syllables, 1 syllable. Does it look like a red wheelbarrow to you? Does it look like a wheelbarrow, each line?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, that's what it is. So each couplet is a wheelbarrow.
Cool.
Yeah. So I don't know. I wasn't sure if you knew that. So
you know, one of the things I was trying to do with my poem, so, you know, I tried to do the same kind of thing at the end, but one of the things I was really wanting to do, and I've been working on this poem for such a long time, is that I wanted the end of each of each stanza to be its own poem. So if you took the last word of each line
Mhm.
in each stanza, it would make a mini poem,
Yeah.
right? So here, man crossed white. This is like purification or something like that. Year hits bandana. I was thinking of the year I got jumped into Bulldogs, you know, the gang. Bulldog bite too. You know, one of the things I learned as a gangster is that it's your friends that would often be the ones that hurt you the most. Virgin, get tonight. You know, a lot of my book is basically about my own experiences meeting my wife for the first time, because I met my wife when she was 15 and I was 16. And this was before I got seriously into gangs, seriously into drugs. And, you know, we had 2 children right away. We were always broken up, on again, off again, because I was, you know, doing my little gangbanger thing. But she was always there. She was always in my corner. She always loved me. And honestly, the way that I view it is like her love was like a blessing from God. And so one of the things, like how the Cholo became a mystic, you know, the book that I'm trying to do is like show how this relationship between, you know, the main character, who's kind of me, but kind of not, falls in love. And it's the love that helps him, you know, find himself, you know, battle past his addictions and things like that. And so that's kind of, you know, what I'm trying to do is at the end, you know, have something. And so anyways, that's kind of what I'm doing. And at the end, you know, I didn't know what to do, but I wanted to have that line because I want people to know that I'm referencing something famous in poetry. Like poetry talks to itself and poets talk to each other.
Yeah.
And I really like the idea of having a black and white picture juxtaposed with the image of this, you know, this person.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Maria, any questions, Maria?
No, I mean, I do have more questions, but I think it'll take a long time.
Well, maybe we can save the last few minutes for final questions. But Kenny, maybe you can close up with a poem, and then maybe we can do some final questions.
Okay. Let's see. I'll read that letter to the neighbor then. How's that?
I love that poem.
I've worked on that one too since it got published, and I changed it a bit, but I'll read the one that you're familiar with. Okay, so, you know, the backstory to this is, so in the book, basically there's 2 narratives. There's a narrative as if the narrator never got educated, never became a professor, went to prison, you know, became an addict, you know what I mean? Just lived like a not so great life. But then there's the narrative. And so some poems are like, if he did get educated, if he became a writer, if he became a professor, if he married that woman, and if he had children and grandchildren. So there's like 2 narratives, and I kind of like to play with both of them. So this is like a true story, but it's a blending of like, you know, the gangster one with the like professor one, 2 worlds colliding. And this has, you know, it's kind of true because I moved to a nice neighborhood, really nice neighborhood. But, you know, sometimes I walk around without my shirt on and I've got tattoos and I'm just not quite sure if I'm watering my lawn, if my neighbors are going to be tripping on me because, you know, it's, you know, you don't see any graffiti over here. So this was kind of like, you know, me.
Can you share that? Can you share your screen up? Can you show us your screen?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we got it?
Oh, yeah. This is the poem that we, this week, so.
So letter to the neighbor after we moved to the good part of town. Jeff, I brought you pomegranates from our tree. Jeff, this is the first crop from land called mine. I'm a city boy, a homeboy. My wife and I once lived in a cracked apartment on the bad side of town where you can get anything if you'll pay dearly enough. We live near the freeway where homeless men push fruit-filled carts, empty bottles in beer cans, blue tarps, torn cardboard, and hidden under an army blanket, a solitary folded picture, When we married, we purchased a home near train tracks where junkies harvest track marks, and each full moon we dreamed them howling, love-struck coyotes. Jeff, I brought you this basket of first fruits because I'm one of the good ones. So if one night you should drive by on your way home from work, collared shirt in your weakness, reeking of coffee and tobacco and secret whiskey, and if you should see me, a tattooed cholo dancing on the roof of his house, a quart of malt liquor and what looks like a glass pipe in my hands, and if you should hear me bark at the dark sky's bright bounty, Jeff, remember this treaty of pomegranates we made.
Fantastic. Love the closure. Love the closure. All righty.
Cool.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Kenny. Any final thoughts?
To all your students, just do your best, you know, get as much extra credit as you can. Don't give up. Yes, it's hard, but you know, you can do it. You know, education definitely changed the trajectory of my life. I'm very thankful, you know what I mean? And I know it can do the same for you, Maria, and for all of your students. So, you know, just do your best and be true to yourselves. So, yeah.
Well, Kenneth, I want to thank you for joining us in this class, and Maria, thank you for participating with your wonderful questions. And so,
Thank you.
yeah, we'll connect soon and have a great day, man.
You too, brother.
Awkward,
Nice
right?
meeting
Awkward
you.
Zoom.
Take care. God bless.
So I'm gonna pause the video and we'll come back at 11. Maria, I don't know if you're gonna join us when
Or Marisol Baca.
Baca.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take a short break to 11 o'clock and then we will resume.
Okay.
All righty. All right. Welcome everyone back. And for this hour, we have Marisol Baca. And I'm not sure what's going on because she's scheduled to be here, but I mean, you never know. An emergency could have arisen. Maybe she's having technical problems with her computer or her Wi-Fi or whatever the case is. I did send a couple of messages out to I texted her and I sent her a message via Fresno City College web mail, and so hopefully we hear back from her. So, that being said, she was one of the other poets that we looked at last week, and I want to start off with going back to her webpage right here. But this is marisolbaca.com. This is her website. Hopefully, you all got a chance to explore. But I'll go ahead and start with her bio. And the font is not really the greatest font, so I'm just going to expand that. So hopefully we can see that. So can you see the text here, Maria? It's clear? Okay. So I'll go ahead and read that. Marisol Baca, Fresno's Poet Laureate, is the author of Tremor, a full-length collection of poems from 3 Mile Harbor Press. Marisol's work has been published in FLIT, hopefully SPF Lit, I think that's how you say it, magazine, Narrative Northeast, River Lit, Shadowed, and an anthology of women writers, the Acentos Review, and many others. She was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and grew up around generations of family in an old adobe house. Her family later settled in Fresno, California. She received her Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from Cornell University and won the Robert Chasen Poetry Award for her poem, Revelato. Marisol is an English professor at Fresno City College and lives with her husband in a house in the center of town. She continues to write and teach and is busy working on her second book. And Marisol just joined us, so that's wonderful. So welcome, Marisol, and hope your day is going well.
It is. Thank you. I mean, you know, with all the pandemic stuff, it's always like moving, going somewhere else, you know, so I had to dropped by my nephews to see how they were doing. And
Ah,
so I was like, I didn't realize it was so much time to get there. So, but I'm here now, and thanks for having me. How are you doing,
so
Michael?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing great. You know, just rolling with the pandemic like everyone else.
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, I know. Looking good.
Thank
Hi, Maria.
Hola, hi.
I am Marisol. Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Yeah, I know that this is being recorded so that it can be, shared later on with the class. But I just wanted to say hello to everybody. Hi.
We have
I recognize you,
we have another student.
Mario.
In.
I know Mario. I've been a teacher.
Okay, all right. And
But
then
yes.
Mario trying to. I think she's here. He's here. Yeah. Mario.
Yeah, I'm here.
How you doing, Mario?
Good, man. Tired. Shit, let's keep working. You know what I mean? I barely got off work like 2 hours ago. So I'm laying down and Miss B, I got the utmost respect for her, so I had to come here and holler what she got to say.
Mm-hmm.
I really look up to her. She hella tired.
Fantastic. And we have Maria, who was with us last hour. We had Kenneth Chacon, so we got to talk to him for a bit.
Lucky. Yeah, he's
Yeah, that was a good interview.
inspirational.
And so, well, speaking of inspiration, we have another inspiration of mine, Marisol Baca, and we've been friends and poets and you know in co-artists, I guess, in this for many years, and we work together, and here we are, and it's been a minute because we're all doing our own thing, and as far as like as instructors and being online, and it's obviously not the same, but but anyways, I want to welcome you, and so let's start with just talking about a little bit of background. You were born in New Mexico, is that correct?
Yes. Hey, Michael, do you have the ability to allow me to co-host so I can share screen? I have just
Yes, I
a
do.
couple of pictures that I could, throw up there so people can see them.
Fantastic. Yeah.
If not, no biggie.
No, I can, because I just learned that about a
I think it.
and you should be able to now. I just changed the setting.
Yes, I think I can. Yeah. Thank you. I have like a fancy, not that fancy, but I can only make this smaller. I know. And it's good to see you. And yeah, our lives are just, kind of go like this, right now, especially because things are so busy, but
And it looks like things are opening up. So
yeah.
So hopefully we'll be back on campus in the fall. So
There will be some, got it.
partial.
Okay. There will be some.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
So you grew up in New Mexico, and you came here to Fresno around what year?
I came around, let's see here, desktop. Okay. Can you guys see this? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay. And yep. Okay. So can you see the picture of the Adobe house?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I came to Fresno around when I was in first grade. So I was young. I've lived here for most of my life, except for, I go back to Albuquerque, where I'm from, every year. And I used to go back every year, maybe twice a year. And that's where all of my family live, all of my extended family live, and only my parents are from Albuquerque. And here's a picture of an adobe house. If you read the poem, You'll probably recognize, I talk a little bit about the adobe house, and I've got a picture of an horno, and in the background are the Sandia Mountains, and the trees, the cottonwood trees that I just learned that they're in the Rio Grande Valley in Albuquerque, close to the house where I grew up in. And it's the largest continuous grove of cotton trees in the world.
Amazing.
And they get their water from the Rio Grande River. So that's where I'm from originally. But yeah, I moved to Fresno when I was young because my dad got a job here, and moved with my mom and my dad and my sisters and brother, and lived here like most of my life.
Mhm.
And met Michael when I was young. So I've known your professor for quite some time, since we were, I was probably around 17 or 18, and that's a few years. So, because I'm only 20 now.
Yeah. I think I was early 20s, maybe 19, 20 myself.
Yeah.
But I met your dad first. Your dad was a professor at may you rest in peace. But I met your father at Fresno State, and I was in QUA, Chicano Writers and Artists Association. And any of you are interested in being active at the university level with literature, Chicano Writers and Artists Association is a great organization. But anyways, he was our advisor, and so I just remember having wonderful conversations with him on the onset, and we just got along so well. Very wise and very funny, very endearing. And I met him first, and then I met you when you started coming to one of the poetry readings I was hosting, co-hosting with Tim Hernandez, called Metamorphosis. And so that's
right.
Maybe 97, 98, around there.
Yeah.
So that's where we met. And since then, we've just been great friends, and we've done many poetry readings together. Just so much stuff, right? So much stuff.
Yes.
But
yeah.
anyways, and here we are, and here you are, you're a professor, and you came out with a book called Tremor, which is a wonderful collection. And so hopefully I can share my screen. Let's see. This is your page right here, and something about yours and Kenny's websites are amazing. I just have to say. But
My what? Sorry.
your websites, both of your websites are amazing.
Yes, it's a great, it's Squarespace. So it's a really, really good platform for websiting.
Mhm.
And a lot of it is done for you, but you get to choose, what the layout and everything. But it is really, I love Squarespace. So
I gotta look into that.
that's from my book release when
Yeah.
the book came out. And Mike, you might even be there. There you are. I see you.
I'm way in the back there, right
I see you
there.
sitting in the chair at the table.
Mm-hmm.
So, and really that reading encompassed so many things about Fresno that I love, the poetry community in general, but also just like all of the people that you meet along the way, that are, maybe writers, maybe not writers, but that are willing to support you and be there for you. And this picture is a mix of all of those people.
Yeah.
It's not just writers. There's, I see someone who's a DJ. I see someone who's a writer. I see someone who's a makeup consultant, teachers. And, so that's one of the things that, I really love about this area is you don't have to be a writer necessarily to take writing seriously or to understand the wealth of writers that we have right here. I mean, like your instructor, your teacher right now, who, had he not written a book, would not have inspired me and pushed me to believe in writing and believe in my voice. And all of those conversations, you talk about conversations with my dad, but conversations with you, Michael, over the years, I mean, you're one of the only people in my life that really pushed, you know, that part of me and said, hey, you can do this. If I can do this, you can do this. And, you know, and I wouldn't be where I am without my friends like you. So, and also an amazing writer to boot. So, and yeah, just finished my second year, my second term as poet laureate, first term, but it's second year as poet laureate of Fresno, which is basically, like, I see it as an ambassadorship. And I try to bring, try to do what I just said about Michael to you, to everybody else. You know, I try and be a voice for people, for younger or newer writers to feel like, you know, they have the option to be a writer and to do that.
So, yeah, so you're the current Fresno Poet Laureate, and they just they have the new Poet Laureate who's going to start her, Megan Bohegian, who's going to start her tenure in April, I believe. Is that right? Or
no, yeah, she already started. She's April 21st, she started.
it was this last month, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So you're the previous Poet Laureate. So can you talk about, first of all, what a Poet Laureate is, and then your experience as Fresno's Poet Laureate? And by the way, this photo was taken at City Hall, so it's recognized by the city. So
yes, yeah, it's an official appointment. One of which, Michael, I think you were a part of. I know you were a part of because I was to get to even to have the poet laureateship in Fresno. You were one of the writers of the position, of the appointment. So again, wouldn't have this appointment without you. And basically, I think of it as an ambassador. And I think ambassador is a little easier for some people to understand, because what you do as an ambassador is you go to different places and you represent the place that you're coming from, and you talk about all the things that are a part of the place that you're coming from. Yeah. And you're a part of the conversation. And as poet laureate, the place that I'm coming from is poetry and literature, and trying to talk about it, but especially trying to talk about it to people who might not get it. And that's why I put it that way. And I think a lot of poet laureates have put it that way. In fact, Joy Harjo just spoke on that. And she's the United States Poet Laureate, the current United States Poet Laureate. And I think that that's a really good way of thinking about it, because it's something, poetry is not something that everybody just does, you know, it's not something everybody's familiar with. It can be even a little bit nerve-wracking or scary to some people, but to me, it's a way of expressing yourself, and a really amazing artistic way of expressing yourself and learning and honing language. So for the past 2 years, I've worked on projects to try to highlight poetry in the community, as well as, you know, just promote writers that are otherwise sometimes a little bit marginalized or unseen. And that's the work that I've been doing the past 2 years. Also, I've been going to some classrooms for elementary school students. And I may have been in a classroom that you know of. Definitely been at Daly and Hamilton, a number of others. So that's pretty much what I do. And it's kind of like being also a salesperson, you know, like a door-to-door book salesman. And I knock on your door and say, this is what poetry is, come and join. But this year, the pandemic has been a little bit difficult to do that, but there are other ways to kind of get to people.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's see. I'm gonna unstop, or I'm gonna stop sharing. Unstop. So how did you get, like? Why did you choose poetry? I mean, you could have chosen fiction or nonfiction, but you chose poetry. Not to say that you're not writing fiction or nonfiction, but
I'm not.
Poetry.
Why poetry?
Yes.
I think for some people, they are the most comfortable in dancing, or they're the most comfortable wearing amazing outfits that they put together, or they're the most comfortable when they're making food for their family, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
What they do, and it's kind of a language, and it's the language that I am most comfortable in. And one of the reasons why is it's short, right? Lots of poems are short. I can create a little mini world where there wasn't before, and it's not an arc, a gigantic arc. My stories have a tendency not to be gigantic arcs, and putting them together, you can thread them together and stories can arise. So I still feel like my story is being told, but the language that I choose to use is poetry. And for those limitations, I like setting those kinds of limitations for myself, short. And how do I do this in this amount of space? How do I do this so that the language is really alive? And it didn't come out in essay writing, although I teach essay writing and I'm a much better essay writer now that I teach it. I'm sure Mario can probably agree with that too. And everyone else on here is, the more you do it, the more you learn how to do it well.
Yes.
But I'm not an essay writer. I've never been 100% comfortable with essay writing. And novels. It's not, it's this huge arc of stuff that I am not, I have a hard time even just thinking about one poem, much less like trying to keep track of characters and motivations and things like that. So for me, poetry, I love the limits and I love the language, and I love how it maximizes a small space and it says so much in such a small, if you're really good at doing it, you can say a lot in a tiny little package, and it makes such a big impact. It's also very related to music, and I think much more closely related to music than something like fiction, right? And the music of the line and thinking about how it sounds and reading it out loud and the performance aspect of it, the spoken word aspect of it. Though I'm not a spoken word artist because I'm not that amazing, I recognize that a big part of that is the way that you perform it and read it. And when I read my poetry out loud, every time, I read it, someone will come up to me and say, wow, I've never really heard it read like that. You put so much performance into it. And I just really pay attention to the way that it's read. And I think poetry lends itself to that.
Yeah. I think you bring an interesting point. The idea of the music, and like if you think about a poem like a song, like basically what you're doing is it's a different kind of a song, right? And Tupac Shakur, for example, rapper, his rap music has been taught as poetry in everywhere, really, college and high school, and even I believe middle school. Countless other musicians, Bob Dylan, Carole King. I mean, you can. There's so many singer-songwriters that have been taught as poetry, and it was just. I mean, that's where I kind of like I fit this what you're talking about in. It's like, I mean, it's exactly the same thing, And so we've actually done a project where our poetry was put to music and sung, right? If you
that's awesome.
And so, and that's a whole different. That's an interesting way of looking at the art. But anyways, since we're on this note of hearing your poetry out loud, maybe you want to share a poem.
Sure.
And then we'll open up for questions.
Awesome. I think I'll share, I'll share Sarcophagi in Glass Houses.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a longer poem. You may have read it already. If you haven't, There's a little story that goes with it. And I know because I did teach Mario, I know Mario knows all about New Mexico and New Mexico green chili. Also, I think maybe from New Mexico, right?
Yeah, my mom is. She's
Is that where you're from, Mario? New Mexico as
my
well?
mother is. My
Your
family.
mother,
Oh,
that's
your
right.
mom. Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah. We
Yeah.
get our chili from there like every year. As a matter of fact, my cousin just sent us
Uh,
a big old bag of red
barely
chili.
hear.
I
Yeah.
want it.
Well, I could barely hear you,
Thing every
Mario.
year.
And
Oh, you can barely hear me?
I don't know if your mic is.
Yeah, it's hard to hear you.
Oh, well, let me log out and log back in.
But yeah, so a big part of that and is that is from where I come from, and green chili is special to New Mexicans, and there's these stories that I grew up with of, you know, when we would have funerals or when we would have celebrations or anything that big families would go to, um, every August we would get all of the chili ready, and you had to really get it ready because they would have to they canned it, you know, they peeled it, they put it with garlic and a little bit of salt, and they'd can it and they put it in jars, or not can but jar it.
Yeah.
And they used to, I mean, they still do. If you go to Albuquerque in August, you're going to see these gigantic roasters, and they're churning all of this green chili, and it makes it taste even better. With, like,
So
more
good.
stuff on it. Yes,
Huh.
it's
It's so
delicious.
good. I got some right now in my freezer that I grilled myself, that I use every often. I just made some green enchiladas the other day. So with that hatch chili, you know, so I know.
Crazy.
And it's usually it's called hatch chili, or, you know, New Mexico green chili, red chili too. But
Yep.
so this poem is about that, because I grew up with people we had to peel it and do the whole thing. The other thing about this is, and I'll just show you guys so that you have a reference. There's this picture here, and I'll just go down to it. I won't show all of them. Oh, it's not on here. Boo. It's on this one for sure. Yes, here it is. Okay, so if you can see this right here, I used to live in New York when I went to graduate school, and at the bottom corner right here, I'm circling it, there's this really amazing park, and it's gigantic. It's like acres, like 1,000 acres large. It's gigantic. And they have these huge sculptures, and there's this one sculpture there that's called sarcophagi in glass houses. And a sarcophagi is basically like a tomb, a wrapping or a tomb. I will turn off my email right now. It's a kind of an entombment, and so people used to wrap the bodies in that. And here is an installation, an art installation of this really weird tomb kind of sarcophagi, and the woman who made it built these beautiful glass houses around them and titled it Sarcophagi in Glass Houses. Her name was Magdalena Abakanowicz, and she was a famous Polish poet, a famous Polish sculptor. And she died 2 years ago, almost exactly this time at the end of April. I think it was April 19th. So I'm going to read the poem here, and I'll stop share. Yeah. And so this poem is about New Mexico, and it's also about these weird sarcophagi in glass houses. After an installation at the Storm King Art Center after the death of my great aunt. Number 1, Manuelita sent Mom and Auntie Patsy into the potting room. Piles of chili, skins like dried meat, Mom and Auntie Patsy hitching the meat out, pulling the seeds and membrane from the inner lining, little fingers tugging at the green tongues, speechless in their hands, packing them into glass jars. The day of death was passing by, the coffin on the coffee table, the old sitting together, the men's heads white and scattered like seeds. Manuelita passing out crocheted kerchiefs, monogrammed and stained. Uncle Benny, he had to hold on. His wife looked up from the coffee table. She looked up, but she was already dead. Auntie Patsy was tired of the piles that smelled burnt, the piles my mom kept jumping in, the look of the chilies, mouthless, stemless, plucked. The candles were lit in the little earthen room. Rain began to fall with tin sounds on the roof, and the dead woman smiled from the trees. Mom and Auntie Patsy had welts on their hands. The chili had been too hot to eat. 2. They arrive in pods. The pods are much too tight. They break the sides open. 3. Manuelita constructed her home with an horno in the kitchen. She only burned cedar wood. She had burn marks along her arms, kept feeding the horno, glass shards, cedar wood. But we sold that house. We sold the great cottonwoods outside that house, and the red chile risras, the ones she plumed and fed us, we sold those first. 4. It was in New York, later, much later. I walked in the hills and stayed close to the water, away from the groves. I found these constructed graves, these insect wrappings, these mummies, and all I could do was talk to her. I sat down and talked to her. I think she hoped I'd come along and take hold of her, pass her a story through the weathered panes, tell her New York is a secret passage to Corrales, New Mexico, near the horses, near the great white sand dunes, near the adobe house built around her imprint. And hatch chili in August, rain and acidity. The roasters are large as entry rooms, foyers, churning pods by the hundreds, the burn in our lungs, the burn in our eyes, the whole town crying, and the women by the stove, glass houses make for good mirrors. 5. Great gods of the mountainside, please spare us the duty of eating. Please spare us the acid tongue and the pods, the ground up skins, the veins burst and smell like her, the casings by the molcajete, like translucent tombs, waiting to lend themselves to stone, waiting to effect on the mouth, the acerbic bite and the swelling, waiting for the opiates of the body to pump and roll. 6. Houses the dead, houses the lines and the lines between us, houses the slow shag in our dark past the houses on the right, the houses on fire, the houses on fire, the houses that house, how houses have passed lined by lines, lines of grass, lined pictures fading on walls, lined windows, shingles and rats, and the houses, they house us, the dead and us. There you go.
Bravo, wow, thank you. Wow. And you need to know about the that art installation to really understand that poem. And I'm glad you shared that because it adds so much more context. And that part 6 has always been very powerful because the repetition of houses is amazing. Um, but to know that it's part of that context of the art installation, it just like brings so much more, so much more. So, any questions from Mario or Maria? What, do you have any questions for Marisol?
I think I already asked all the questions I needed to before, but that was one of my favorite poems when I read it. Over the weekend when I had read it at work, it really hit home for me because I kind of understood the whole aspect of the chili being grilled, and coming from New Mexico as well, a hatch chili. I really related to it a lot, you know. Um, it really is really deep, a deep poem, you know. It talks about death. I think maybe it might be a little bit about death because you mentioned at the beginning about your aunt, your tia Patsy passing.
It's
Uh,
my Yeah, it was my great aunt, Manuel, well, my great grandmother, Manuelita. And you know, back in the day, they used to actually have, you know, in those little in the rooms, they would lay the person who had died in the room, and we're not used to that, you know. And they would put them on the table, and they'd make an ofrenda
Wow.
for them, right, with the candles and stuff.
Hmm.
And yeah, so it's definitely about death.
Yeah.
They
It's about
still do
death,
that.
but
So you saw that as a kid? You saw that?
no, I didn't see that.
Oh,
I've seen
okay.
that before. I've
Oh,
seen
you
that.
have seen that before?
Not with
Oh,
her. Not with her. But when I was very little, yes.
oh,
Do
wow.
they still do that?
Not as much anymore. But it was definitely still done when I was really young, you know, so, you know, 100 years ago.
Yeah. Maria, do you have any questions, Maria?
I do. I mean, thank you for reading the poem. I understand it more now. And now that you explained the artwork and the traditions, and also like the way that they make the chili in New Mexico. I've never heard that. It sounds delicious, by the way. Um, I have a question as far as not the poem in general, but I did notice that you're engaged in the community a lot based on your webpage. Do you normally do like readings, like if someone was to ask you, like school readings, like middle schools, elementaries?
Oh
People
yeah.
can just reach out through the webpage?
Yeah, you can reach out through the webpage. It just goes directly, the contact just goes directly to my email, my
Oh, okay,
personal
cool.
email. So you can also reach me if you're interested, or you're interested for somebody else. You can
Mhm.
also reach me on my work email. Either one is fine, and it's marisol.baca.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. I usually go to schools and I'll do readings and stuff like that, or talk about poetry to students. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's really good to know.
Yeah.
I think you may be able to help some middle school students, so that's good.
Yeah, I'm always interested in that. I mean, that's when I really started getting interested in writing, was at that age. So it's kind of an important time, I think, for middle school and older elementary school students. That's when, if you're going to have a passion for some kind of art form, and it is a lot of times poetry, because you can communicate and express yourself through that. It happens then. You know, it's a good time to bring in poets and stuff. Absolutely.
You said you were working on a second book of poems. What's what's that about? Like, is that the number one? That the zinger question?
No, it's good. It's going to be about, okay, so the first book, you guys probably read a couple poems. Those are from the first book, and they're about me growing up in New Mexico. A lot of the new poems are about me here. I have a whole section of poems about art pieces. Obviously, I'm interested in artwork and sculpture and painting. And there's this really fantastic artist named Remedios Varo, and she does these really cool surrealist paintings, and I love them. And so I have some poems about that, and a lot of poems about gardens, but not just your everyday garden. I think I talk a lot about living with my in-laws and their garden, and you know how difficult it is to live with your in-laws, but also people that are different culture than you, and so a lot of poems about that, about what it's been like to live in Fresno as an adult.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's very interesting to me. I mean, you
There's
think
a little
about,
chisme in there, a
I'm
little
sorry?
gossip.
cheese man.
Conflict.
I like cheese man.
Mario, I'm sorry.
No, I should say a little cheese man, right? Is that what you said, Miss B?
Yeah.
I
Well,
said I like cheese man. But I
if
have
you
one more. I have one more question.
if you want to write and make it interesting, you write about
Oh yeah.
you know what I mean, and you get so much the cheese man, whatever you want to call it, the conflict within yourself. I mean, those are all those are there's so much material there. There's so much
Yes.
material there.
Yeah.
And so Joyce Carol Oates, I wish I knew the exact quote, but she would say that she said she's a famous author that we have a lifetime of stories to tell from our first 7 years of living, which is amazing. So,
Yes.
so there you go. So when you think you have writer's block, you really don't have writer's block. Maybe you want to share another poem, Marisol?
Yeah, sure. Mario, did you have a quick question or should
Oh
I?
yes, I did the website. What's the website?
It's
So I
just
can
my
go-
name. It's Marisol Baca.
Oh, that's it.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
MarisolBaca.com.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty good website. I may say so myself. Took a lot of work to do it.
Yeah, it's a great website.
I liked it.
Do you want me to read Apple Orchard or do you want me to read something else from
Whatever you like.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Apple Orchard's pretty self-explanatory. If you read it, you probably understood it a lot better than Sarcophagi and Glass Houses. Sarcophagi and Glass Houses is like, is a fun one to read because it has a lot of repetition and it's like, it's kind of dramatic. But Apple Orchard's really just about how when I was little, I used to think that there was my uncle had his apple orchard and we would go into it. And I thought like that when you went to the end of the apple orchard, that the world ended. Like, I was like, oh, that's the end of the world. So like, I would never go over there. And I think there was like a ditch. So like it dropped off to a ditch and I'd go and I'd look and I'd go like, oh, that's kind of scary. And just what you think of when you're little. And then the other story I think in here is my grandma, when she was really little, she broke her leg and she had to go and live with her aunt for a while. And she did nothing all day because her leg was broken. She just stared at the mountains and she thought she saw the face of an Indio in the mountains. And she just looked at it every day. And so when she told me that story, it made me think of what it's like to be young and to think these weird things about the surroundings that are not true about your surroundings at all. But you're connected in ways that how little kids are. They're connected to things,
Yes.
They see things that that adults don't, and they're so open to those things. And so I think that's what
new to
it's
them.
about. Apple Orchard, Corrales, New Mexico, summer 1982. 1. We drove past the river and into Bernalillo. There were crosses in my aunt's eyes. The mountains call you back, she said. The sandias rose before us. Clean pink peaks and the crags below, dark and greenish. We drove into the dim patches. Beyond the old house was the apple orchard. San Juans and Roman beauties were close to dropping. We would be picking soon. Culling and shining, wild asparagus grew in patches among the trees. 2. Beyond the orchard, a ditch, attractive with slender saltgrass and buffalo grass, infested with piquant creosote. Beyond that ditch, the earth stopped. The edge of the world stayed back beyond the ridge, waiting. My uncle said there were alfalfa fields that went on and on until they hit the mountains. But I knew what was really there. I knew the smell of green apples the same way. The familiar dreams of falling over that edge, sun in my eyes, the taste of dirt, the itchy tall grass and weeds giving way. I could smell the horses far off in the neighbor's field. I could feel the void beneath my leather sandals. 3. My grandmother lost her face in the mountains. She watched them the year she broke, watched them turn gray to pink to red. She saw things in them. Once an Indian's face, another time her own, looking back. 4. She watched her mother being lowered into the ground, a childhood wrapped in an old black dress. She went all crazy, all fury and open-mouthed over her coffin. My aunt held her back. She made sounds like horses running. My aunt's arms stretched out, gripping the coffin. She struggled to climb on top. I was too young. I sat in my mother's lap, everyone watching, everyone crying, and Uncle Benny falling to the floor. Mama, mama.
Wow. Wow.
So there's a lot of death in this one too.
Yes. No, yeah.
And
Love the
yeah,
naivete of it all. I love,
yeah,
I love
and
the
that's a
naivete of
story.
it. Yeah.
Say that again, sorry.
No, I love the naivete of the speaker. This of you, you know, your observations of the, you know, of death and family and yeah.
I think it's hard sometimes to write like the voice of a child without sounding silly or childish, or like, it's cheesy.
Mm-hmm.
And one way I think that to do that, to get to that, what I did was I tried to just describe things in a way that seemed weird or different from how I might describe. Like, nobody really sounds like what horses sound like running, right? But a
Right, right.
child makes those kind of connections where an adult might not. And so it's sometimes helpful if you're writing like that to, rather than sound like a little kid,
Mm-hmm.
to make associations that little kids might make. And that's part of that imagination.
I
Yeah,
have a question.
it works wonderful.
Um, how long did it take you to write this poem? Do you remember?
It probably, I had a lot of revisions on it. So it probably took me, a few hours to get like the backbone of the poem, but it took me probably, I'd say, a good 3 weeks of working it and, changing things and stuff like that. I remember it coming out some parts pretty close to it, but what I remember about this poem also is I had another kind of poem that I kind of started to piece into it that wasn't like a poem by itself. So it took a while to do revisions, but most of it came in the first few hours of writing it.
I like it. It's a very strong poem.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I mean, I'm in awe of the fact that it only took you weeks to write this poem. I mean, you write a lot of your poems are long and they're written in sections, and that takes quite a bit of work. Um, Sometimes poems can take years, but to hear that this poem virtually wrote itself,
Yeah.
I'm in awe. I'm in awe. So
Sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't,
exactly.
Sometimes the poem comes straight to you, sometimes, and then there's a quotation. Sometimes the poem comes to you perfect line by line, but in the exact opposite position. So the end at the beginning and the beginning at the end. And what I do though, and I think a lot of poets probably do this, I do a lot of like ruminating or marinating, and I think of it forever, so I had that image of my grandma looking at that, and then the image of the ditch. And I worked it in my mind over and over and over and over again before I wrote it. So it wasn't in a poem form in my mind, but there were specific things like, I wanted my grandma to be looking at those mountains and then seeing a reflection of herself. So I was thinking about those things for a long time. And I'd say at least 6 months, before I probably wrote the poem. I just didn't have the words for it yet.
So I have a question. So poems don't have to rhyme then, right? Pretty much. See,
No.
and so when you were when you started reading your first poem or when you were talking, I came up with one in my head, right? About me being in my addiction, you know, and me wanting to come out of the dark and being lost and trying to find the light, you know. And so it's just, it takes, I guess, I've been thinking about this poem for a while, you know. I always think about wanting to write a poem, you know, write poems about me being in my addiction and being where I'm at now, you know. How would I like start doing that? Do I just start doing how you just said it, like just start processing it more? Don't do that. Don't, no writing. You
You
know,
know,
like
it's
I don't know. You inspire me. Like every time I hear a poem, I'm like, damn, I could do that. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah, you can. You know,
You
Mario,
know, so
I think a big part of it is your connection to music as well. I know you're connected to music, and a lot of times when you're doing that in your head, it's like what a lyricist does too, you know, is they really think about how does this sound?
mhm,
Doesn't have to rhyme. It can rhyme if that makes you feel like, you know, if that is a parameter for you that you want. Um,
right,
that's why people like it, because it sets something up. They go, oh, I need to find a word that goes with this next, and it
right,
helps them get there. But for me, a big part of it is you're already thinking about the symbol, right, Maria?
right.
You're
Yeah,
thinking about coming out of the darkness, and that's an important image for you. Just like me thinking about my grandma and how she dealt with her mother's, you know, her mother's death,
right.
and how hard that was, and those images, they stay with you, they haunt you, you know, like like an addiction might, you know.
Hmm,
And
hmm.
but what you can do is you can say it, you know, like if you're interested in hip hop lyrics or spoken word, sometimes starting with that can make you, you know, think of something that sounds good that goes together, then write it down, even if it's just a couple of lines. I'm coming out
Okay.
of the dark, I'm coming out of the dark. And then write it down. But you have to, at some point, you've got to write it down. You know, you can think
Right.
about it forever, but
Hmm.
until you write it down, it doesn't become a poem. It doesn't become real in that sense, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already actually wrote it down. I wrote it down. I think 2 years ago when I was in your class the first time, and I went to your that poet over there in Tower District. Remember
Yep.
that?
Yep.
Yeah, that right there. Because I used to write poems before. While I used to write poems while I was loaded, right? About wanting to be clean. So it's like, so I kind of got an idea of how to do it. I think I just get down on myself thinking I can do it, you know, because I overthink it too much. But hey,
Martha,
shit,
you've
if you
proven
can do
already.
it,
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
you
it's
know,
not me. You've proven already. I know you. So you've proven already you can do it. There's
yeah.
not much that you can't do. So
True.
I wouldn't be
Okay,
but it is nervous to say, oh, this is a poem, I'm gonna share it. But share it. Send it to Mr. Madrano. Send it to me.
right. And not only that, does it have to? If I start rhyming, does it have to continue to rhyme?
No, you can do
No.
whatever you want.
Ooh, that's even better. I like that.
Worry
Okay.
about that stuff after it's written. Because once you read it, you can go, oh, I want it to rhyme, or I don't want it to rhyme at all, or whatever. Or there's a better word for this. Just get it down. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, case in point, this week, students are reading one poem in form and one poem that is completely experimental. So when,
So in our class, we're doing that.
and actually the poem that's in form it's kind of experimental in of itself because it's a double sonnet.
Oh my gosh.
I've
See, I don't even know
never
what
heard
that
of
is.
such a
What
thing.
class is this?
Kind of lit.
What is double sonnet? See, what you
Yeah,
guys
I
are
don't know
asking
what
me,
it is.
what is that?
So I
Speak
leaned
to me English.
Sonnet, but two of them. Two
so
sonnets.
so I linked
14 lines.
I linked the
14 lines.
I linked the definition of a sonnet in the assignment. So So when you start on the assignment, I'll
I
speak.
gotta.
I'll speak more about it next week. But
Oh, yeah.
you
That's
know,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the sonnet is
My
essentially
poetry
a
students do
14
write on
line
it.
poem, and it's written in iambic pentameter, meaning that each line has about 10 syllables, and so that's pretty much the structure of the poem. But yeah, it's a great poem. It's called Double Sonnet, and then
Maria, do you also write? Sorry.
No, I don't. That's I'm like, okay. I mean, but once I put I start typing, it comes to me easily.
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah.
so yeah,
And when you're done with it, you have something. I mean, that's not like, that's like saying, I wrote a 15-page, a really good 15-page essay. A double sonnet is not something a lot of people do,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's not as scary as it sounds scary, but it's not that as scary, but it's a feat. And it's cool because at the end you go, oh man, I got this really cool, and whether you're a writer or not, I've got this really cool thing that
I
I
mean, you said
created.
it perfectly. As long as you start putting something on paper and then you connect things, it might not turn out well, but then once you have like the structure of it, the backbone, you start taking things and then adding things, and that's when it starts coming together.
Absolutely. Did I say
Yeah,
that? Awesome.
You know,
Did I say that?
yeah, I'm not an actor or anything like that, but I really love to hear directors and actors talk about their, and you can apply that to writing. And so this one story I heard once by James Gandolfini, who played Tony Soprano.
Right.
He's like the total opposite of how he's portrayed in The Sopranos as this mob boss. If you haven't watched Sopranos, you should watch Sopranos.
Okay.
It's an HBO series. But he would often work with people who had very little acting experience. And so, how are you going to make this scene with Tony be the like important, almost like Emmy Award level type of scene, right? And all he said was, just know your lines. In other words, know something about poetry or whatever. Look him in the eyes and just speak your lines, but always look him in the eyes. In other words, just be honest and just let it flow out,
Yeah.
and the magic happens.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen right away. And whatever you intend to write, it may be something else. So if
Yeah.
you have this idea, like I have this idea of writing a poem about shaving, but the first time I shaved, when I was 13, very young, my dad did not approve. And so, but I have it's just an idea right now. If I start writing it, it might turn into something else. It might not even be about shaving.
Yeah, and it usually does. And then you go like, you're trying real hard to make it about that other thing.
Yeah.
And then, but your mind is such an amazing thing, like
Mhm.
it doesn't work. It's not like a computer. It does,
Yes.
it goes in these wonderful, amazing other places. And if you don't let it do that, then you're not going to be excited or interested in what you're doing. And I
Yeah,
think that goes with any art form.
exactly.
Is creativity does not work that way. It starts one place. I mean, that's why I like jazz and stuff like that. I mean, riffing on hip hop lyrics, and doing spoken word are so amazing because it's a creative moment where you go like, oh, I think I'll do this because it sounds really good and repetitious,
Yeah. Or go see your favorite singer. Hopefully they start opening up for concerts. Go see your favorite artist or singer at see them twice on the same tour, and you'll get a totally
That's
different
a good
tour.
idea. Yeah, I like that.
All
Yeah,
right. So any final comments before we close up shop here? No? Okay.
I mean, I do have a comment. I just love the fact, as I mentioned previously, I mean, although you're not from the Central Valley originally, it seems like I took it as like you made this your home because you're so involved, and then you have the I don't know if it's still active, but the wildfire fund still on your
Right.
page. then you're willing to go and speak to schools. I love that part. And then reading that poem that you reread to us, I can't say that word,
Sarcophagi.
yeah. Like that really helped me understand the poem once you explained also like what that tomb like structure was, because at first I couldn't connect it to everything going on in the poem. But now that I know what that like is for, then the whole poem just comes together. I mean, I'm glad that you did this interview per se with us.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
thank you. That's appreciated. And that poem's not it's a difficult poem if
It
if
is.
you don't know the references. That's why it'd be great to have a book, with pictures in it. And you can, I can like explain things, but some of the fun part is also piecing it together. Like if you go back to that poem and just look at a little part of it, you'll go, oh, this, connects to this.
Yes.
So, but thank you.
Well, thank
I'm
you.
so glad to be here.
Thank you, Miss Baca. Thank you for being here. It's good
Absolutely.
seeing you.
You guys, much love. Thank you. And thanks so much, Michael, for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a pleasure. So it was a great interview. And so, yeah, good luck on your new book, next book. That makes me want to write. That,
You should.
Absolutely.
Yes, you should. Get it done. We'll have
Yeah.
to come out the same time again. Well, it roughly. Mine came a little after. A lot after.
Were you in a book?
Yeah,
Michael?
Michael. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm.
Just Google me.
How can we read your book in class?
Oh, because
That's too much ego.
I'm not really that type of, I don't know. Some instructors do, but I choose not to. There's so much more that we've got to read from others to learn. So yeah.
True.
Maybe
Have
that's
him
the
review
class.
some of his stuff. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, Google me.
Born
Yeah,
in
I
the
will.
Cavity of Sunsets. What a title. Man, I wish I would have had that title. All right. Peace, you guys. Peace
All
and
right, have a good
love.
one.
Take care.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye bye.
Bye.